Hi, it's me, Amanda Solar, the Soulful Connector. Let's face it, the only way to really connect with someone is to get real. So here we go. Let's connect.
Connection. Let's talk about connection. Let's talk about connection. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so I'm here with Richard Paynton, who's the CEO and also the CTO of Dontech. And guess what? I don't even know what that means. Is it the Chief Technology Officer?
It is. So my business partner is the COO, so Chief Operating Officer. And so if you look at the difference between those two roles, CEO is kind of looking out 5 years. The COO is kind of running the 1 year. And obviously there's overlap. And if you look at the CTO and then the head of engineering, a CTO is looking out 5 years, and the engineering is short term, the technology roadmap, but they're doing the applications engineering, they're doing the sustaining engineering, they're doing the quality engineering, but the where the company is going to go. So there's a lot of balance. Plus, I grew up on the engineering side, and I have fun with both, but if you ask me to pick one, the technology is great, but the people is also equally great. And the fun thing that I always recommend to co-ops, and Dontech's been blessed to have 2 to 3 co-ops from Drexel every 6 months. We get them on a 6 month rotation. We've done it for over 20 years now. And one thing I always recommend to the co-ops is people teach you commonly how to engineer yourself. They forget that an equally, and actually in many cases, a more powerful way to engineer is through people. And so I always recommend stay in touch with your smartest friends, your best professors, because one of the greatest compliments you can offer anybody is to reach out and ask for their advice, for their opinion. And you can do it as a CEO, and you can do it as a CTO, and you can do it as an engineer. You can do it in any job. And if we all look around us, we have friends that went into different fields, and they're better at you than something else. So why reinvent the wheel? Why not reach out to an expert? Which is kind of what you're doing in your world.
You're so right, because everybody has like this really interesting, unique story and a unique approach to living their life and evolving. And Richard, one thing that has always fascinated me, you're assuming a leadership role at such a young age, because when I picture myself in your shoes, oh, to back up, your father passed away very unexpectedly. He was the leader of a prominent company, along with your mother helped him in that role. I don't know. You can explain to me, how much her leadership role was at the time. And you at maybe 23 or 24.
I was a year and a half out of school. So Dontech is a family business. It started in my parents' basement, then it grew to the basement and garage, and then it started to take over the kitchen and part of the first floor, and then they moved the business to a small industrial building, and everything was in Doylestown. And then it didn't do so well, so it moved back to the house for a little bit, and then it moved into uh, uh, a converted barn into an industrial building. Then in the um, probably mid 1970s, it moved to the other end of the industrial park we're in now, and we rented a small space there, and then it slowly expanded from there. And in 1985, it had built the building, the first phase of the building I'm in now. And then my father was the idea person. He had a technical sales. He also had a product development background. My mother was initially nurse manager in the ICU department at Doylestown Hospital. With my dad's encouragement, she went back and got a business degree, and so she became the financial side of the business. And both parents were continuous learners, but sometime in the mid 1985s, he showed up at work and he realized the companies that we were courting. He said to my mom, he goes, Doreen, the building doesn't look big enough. So we actually put an addition on the building before we needed one because
Wow, that's a lot of foresight.
yeah, and could have squished was kind of in that crossover period. And people forget that the businesses kind of grow digitally, and sometimes your overhead goes through the roof, and then your sales increases, and your overheads drop into a proper percentage. So unfortunately, the timing for the business in 1988, we were slowly growing at a steady pace. We were absorbing into the building, but the building still was well into the six figures of bank loans. And when I say bank loans, we actually were fortunate enough to get a low interest loan through PETA, with the Pennsylvania Economic Development. And at the time, I was traveling in Europe for Dontech, and I got a call at 2 or 3 in the morning that my dad had passed away. And so my mother, at the time, was running operations and she was running the finance. My dad was running the engineering, and he was running the sales and marketing. But the company was small. We were somewhere between 13 and 17 people, counting the three of us. And so mother did what I kind of alluded to in our earlier conversation, is she reached out to other business professionals that had longer tenured in larger companies. And she asked, what do you think I should do? And one of the business professionals was in our industry, and he asked my mom, he said, well, what are your assets? What are your liabilities? And she went through everything. And then he asked the question, where do your products come from? Who does the innovation at the business? And at the time, we really only had two engineers, my dad and myself. And now we're down to myself. And this industry person's nickname was, well, his name is Harold Ketchum, but his nickname was Ketch. He goes, well, let me meet your son. So an old restaurant in Doylestown, Conti's Restaurant, was still in business, and he grilled me for 4 hours. And what he told my mom was that I was an innovative engineer and you could build a business and keep the products viable on that front. But he also commented, he knows absolutely nothing about business, but you can teach him that. And my mom knew a lot about business, but she also had great resources to keep teaching herself and to help coach me. And so she hired a college friend who was a successful business owner who had retired of my dad's. And he acted as a coach. And then unfortunately, he passed away of cancer. And so she hired another friend of
Wow.
hers to be an executive coach. And then I got involved in um, an organization originally was called Tech and later called Vistage. And I had heard about the organization through a business friend and personal friend of my parents, Bob Byers, who were Byers Choice.
Right.
And so it was just a continuous learning. And we dug out of almost $2 million worth of debt, and we grew the company to um, 100-person organization. We brought in today probably 10% of what we are doing today, we were doing when my father passed away. I think the tagline we came up with is we have had a long success in solving problems worth solving. And one thing that I learned from my dad is whether you're a giant 3M or a smaller business like Dontech, is you have limited resources. So you pick the problems that are somewhat tangible to where you can kind of extrapolate from where you are, but something that's meaningful for your important customers. And they always say problems are opportunities in work clothes. Um, so we did a good job of traveling, getting out in front of customers and looking around and listening to their needs and wants. And a lot of times what they would ask for wasn't necessarily what they really needed. So you had to have the right relationship with the customer to kind of work with them in a partnership. And we learned to give different options. In some cases, it took some time to create the solution, but all the product families that we have, and we keep getting pulled into new high reliability markets because we help solve a problem.
And what I was curious about, Richard, is first of all, did you have any warning? Like, had your dad been ill? Were you at all prepared for this?
Hindsight's 2020. So the looking back in hindsight, there were a bunch of leading indicators. You know, my father's parents both died of heart-related issues. One great uncle died I'm sorry, my great uncle, his uncle, passed
Mhm.
away either 42 or 44 of a heart attack, and his other uncle died of a heart attack. So there were bad
I see.
family history. On top of that, my dad had had high blood pressure for years, and he was on medication for that. But if you look in the shorter term, my mom had been flying with him, and he stopped the flight attendant, and he said, "Is the oxygen correct on the plane?" And she said, "Do you need oxygen?" He said, "I'll get back to you." And so there were little things that
Yeah.
where my one sister married young, a couple of years later, had her son, realized that she didn't marry the right person. So she moved in with her in-laws for a year and then eventually moved home. And while she was finishing up her degree, my parents were watching their grandson, and my dad was watching my nephew. But 80% of the time when my mom would come home, my dad was asleep and Stephen was sitting up. And so, like little things. But
Yeah.
then the week before, he was rewiring a light and he was running up and down the stairs. And at one point, he sat down. And again, Doreen was a retired nurse, but she kept her nursing license actually active up until I think a year before she passed away at 89. So she checked his blood pressure and she listened to his heart. And she later told me the story. She's thinking, "Oh my God." And he goes, "Well, let's wait a minute." And so they waited about 10 minutes, checked it again, and everything seemed normal. Well, what had happened is he had a minor heart attack. And over the course of the week, it slowly strangled the heart so that the day he passed away, he knew something was wrong and came into work a little bit late. And when he came in, he walked to my mom's office. He walked in, he closed the door, he walked over, he had her get up, he gave her a hug and a kiss. And he said, "Doreen, I want you to know I love you. I've always loved you and I will always love you." And he turned around and started to walk out. And she said, "Good God, what's wrong? We've been married 34 years, and I think you told me you loved me 5 times and 3 of them today." And so he said, "Well, that pain I had in my shoulder is now radiating down my arm." And long story short, my mom convinced him to go to the doctor. So he did. And again, here's somebody that spent his entire life in technical sales. And so one of the symptoms of a heart attack is you keep telling yourself you're all right. So when he got to the doctor, who unfortunately was his friend, he said, "Never felt better. Doreen made me come here."
Yeah.
He should have admitted him, but he didn't. He did check an EKG, but he really should have run blood work. So then he came back to work and he said, "I'm fine, nothing's wrong." And later in the day, so now I'm in Copenhagen, I called him to kind of do the download on my workday. And then the conversation went on. And then when we finished the conversation, I went to bed. And I just thought it was just a different conversation. Well, apparently, during the conversation, he shut off the lights in his office and he had the door closed. And my mom was concerned, so she walked, saw his door was closed. She opened the door, saw him sitting in his chair with the lights off. She turned on the light and he said, "Turn off the light. It hurts my skin when the light's on." And so she knew something, she
Hmm.
suspected what was happening. So she quickly got 2 aspirin, gave it to him, closed his door with the lights off, and went and tried to get the family doctor. She couldn't get him on the phone, but now the aspirin kicked in. He felt a little bit better. And so he said, "You know what? I had some conductive silver in my office. I think it's an allergic reaction. I'm going home." So he went home. My mom called my sister, who was in nursing school at the time, and said, "Your father's coming home. Something's not right. I'm going to shut down the office. I'll be home shortly." And he took a shower and he was there with his grandson. and he was always constructive with the kids. I learned to talk to children and answer the questions honestly. And if they're interested, give them the full answer as much as they're interested in. And being an engineer, I'll give you my engineering example. My oldest daughter, when she was about 4 or 5, she asked me how planes flew. So I answered the question, and I didn't go into gory detail, but I went into more than what most would based on my dad's teachings. And one day when I picked her up from pre-K, the teacher pulled me aside and she said, Mr. Paynton, you have a very intelligent daughter. And I said, well, thank you. But why are you saying this? And she said, well, today I asked the class how planes fly. And Katie put her hand up and she goes, it's the Bernoulli effect, which is the path length is longer on the top of the wing, which creates lift. But, you can answer it, and obviously you don't try to bury them in technology, but you give
Yes.
them as much of an answer as they're interested in. My dad did that with the grandkids. And with Stephen, though, this day he wasn't that way. He was a
Mm.
little bit critical. So my sister chased him out of the room, and he said, you know what? Check my blood pressure. And she went to check his blood pressure, and she couldn't find a pulse. And
Mm.
long story short is he coded. And so she started to do CPR, and then he refocused for a second. He said, don't worry, I'm not afraid. I'll be all right. And then he died.
Wow. Wow.
So did we see it? In hindsight, we look back and we said, oh, we should have done something here.
Sure.
Oh, we should have done something there. But the other thing that you can't foresee is um, there's environmental things that can affect anyone.
Yeah.
So my dad was one, I think it's 1 in 10,000 people where the large side of the heart is small and the small side is large. So it was
Oh,
hard.
wow.
And again, you had the family history, but some of the family history is relative to they all ate the same way, they all lived in the
Yeah.
same town. But then you go further than that. My dad had horrible allergies. And at the time, there was a new miracle drug on the market called Seldane, and it was a prescription only drug. So my dad took it for about 5 years, and it was this wonder drug. And he convinced one of his older brothers to take the same medication, which he did for about 2 years. A couple of years after my dad passed away, they pulled Seldane off the market because they found if you took it with anything else, it didn't mix well, and it caused major heart issues, was one of the side effects. My dad's older brothers were identical twins. One died about 10 years after my dad, issues compounded with heart problems. The other one lived to be 91. I'll give you a guess who didn't take Seldon.
Right.
The great lesson that my dad also taught me was, my dad survived Battle of Okinawa in the Navy in World War II. And so even as an impertinent kid, when you went to charge out of the room, he'd say, stop, we have no idea what's around the corner. You're not going to leave under those.
Love
And so even though I had a shorter window with my dad, I don't have any regrets other than there's things I could have said that I would if I knew that we only had that short of a time. But on the flip side of that, nothing I want to take back. And that's a hard lesson because a lot of people learn it the hard
100%. I have a question for you. So everybody today, like one of the big buzzwords is imposter syndrome. So here you are, you're in your early 20s, and now you're going to be the leader of this company. Did you struggle with imposter syndrome? Like, how did you feel about that?
be honest, for the first, so my mom made me the president of the company, but in reality, what she did is I caught all the flack and she made all the decisions. So I ran the engineering side and I ran the operations side, but she really functioned as the president for the first 10, maybe 15 years. And the people that really knew the business knew that she was doing that. And the people that didn't, like a lot of our customers, I understood the products, I understood the technology, I understood the hurdles, I could answer the questions. So that made it easy because I did what I was familiar with. The hard part was then transitioning to that next stage. And
Oh,
it was
yeah.
hard because you're thinking to yourself, who am I trying to fool? I have no clue because you know what you know and you know what you don't know. And so, to just with anything, all you can do is take a deep breath and jump or
Yeah.
take a step. But, you know, uh, through people. trial and error. Uh, you finally get better. It says, gee, I wish I could go back in time with what I know today. I definitely would have been more efficient and more effective, but you know, we we figured it out.
Yeah, that's the journey.
And the good thing that we've done today, so you kind of look at a history of a business, and the first generation, they're the true entrepreneurs, but they tend to also manage by come to me and I'll tell you how to make the decision. The second generation, at least the second generations that I know, they're going to grow up the system, the structure, and the so that we know what's going on, but I don't want to make all the decisions. Otherwise, the business owns you and you don't own the business. Now, with that said, any senior person in any organization, when something goes sideways, you're the one that worries at 2 in the morning. And we've been blessed to have a lot of talented people that truly care. There's other people that, walk out the door and it's a light switch that's, turned off. And I will say that's something in the last 15 years of Dontech, we've really done a great job of not only interviewing for job skills, but also interviewing for cultural fit. Now, we always interviewed for being a nice person, but the cultural fit is more than just being a nice person. Um, why do you do what you do? What do you get excited about? What do you get frustrated about? And then, I love team sport analogies because you don't want everyone the same on the talent because you want to approach a problem with perspective. And even if I look at a small circle where my mom was a financial person through and through, I can do the financial things. I understand. I can read an income statement. I can read a balance sheet. I have my key metrics. I can do the math and I can understand it, but I still approach a problem dominantly from an analytical engineering point of view. Now, engineers and accountants and finance people are wired in some ways very similarly, but my mom and I always approached problems from different perspectives. And the neat thing is it allowed us to make better informed decisions. The company today is so complex, no one person knows everything. And so
Yeah.
we set up a team to, kind of give us that and we're better for it. And my nephew, Stephen Bear, is now my business partner. The 35% ownership my mom had in the company went to Stephen on her passing. And our work in the last, it'll be 4 years in May since my mom passed, is to kind of grow up that structure to get the company to the next level and we really have a lot of great talent. I have other family members. I have another nephew who's brought us on the IT front to a new level, and I have other people that are not family but are part of the Dontech family that have helped um, kind of grow the business. There's a great expression from a Stanford professor and author, Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus and you can go anywhere. But something that Stephen and I also learned is that his follow-up comment is sometimes you don't have the wrong person on the bus, you just have them in the wrong seat. We have them doing the wrong job. And we've all seen it in organizations where, you know, make the best person at the job, the person, kind of running the
Yeah.
department. That's the simplified management version of it. But it goes beyond there. What we also learned is that just adding more people to the structure that you had and adding more layers to it isn't necessarily what's going to get you to the next level. So, I talked a little bit earlier on the engineering. Well, we threw two parts of engineering to operations, one part to sales, and we left R&D as a standalone group. And so the new sales group has business development, it has sales, it has account management, it has customer service, and it has applications engineering all in one group. And it looked totally different 5 years ago. And what we found is one of the problems was the structure that got us to where we were wasn't going to get us to the next level. And so we keep learning And my goal is to build a great company in everything that we do. And we do a lot of really great things, but sometimes we'll get the really hard stuff right and we'll trip over the simple things. We could comfortably sit where we are, but the senior team all agrees that 5x the company in about 5 years. And so we're going to go for it. And it isn't really the size that's important. It's more of implementing effectively the that 5 to 7 year vision and plan. We've looked at objectives and key results, which was something that was used at Intel or EOS as a way to kind of get everyone aligned over around a corporate vision. We have a 1 year strategic plan, we have a 3 year, we have a 5 year, and we're doing a much better job of getting everyone, making sure that on every day you've got motion. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward, one back. We're doing that. And part of our core values also is to have fun. Part of our core values is to give back to the community. Part of it is to have work-life balance. We'll tell anyone when they walk in the door, your family comes first, but work comes second. Your hobbies come third. But if you don't, minimum of 51% of the time, don't have days where you kind of look over your shoulder and you think to yourself, and they're paying me to do this. Kind of like your comment earlier is, oh my God, my kids make fun of me because I can't stop smiling. It means you're doing the right thing. Otherwise, work becomes work. For years, I was an old movie buff, and at one point, was watching all the Errol Flynn movies. And if you look at the Adventures of Robin Hood, he has this sheepish grin on his face, basically saying, and they're paying me to do this. I would have done this I would have paid you to do it. And I was talking with my kids when they were young. I indoctrinated them to a bunch of Disney movies, one of which was Mary Poppins, and they always enjoyed Dick Van Dyke's Bert. And recently he celebrated his 9th birthday.
Yes.
And if you're a Coldplay fan, Chris Martin released a new song, and Dick Van Dyke's in the video. My nephew that I work with, Steven, called me in his office before I was aware of it. He goes, "Oh, you got to watch this." And he plays the YouTube thing. And like 2 seconds into it, I see a white haired man walking away from the camera. And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's Dick Van Dyke." And Steven's like, "How did you know who it was?" I'm like, "Well, I told him, my kids and I always enjoyed his character, but I shared it with my daughters, but I pointed out, why is the man doing so well at 99? Because he's enjoying what he's doing. And if you dig into, I believe he lost one of his daughters, which I think brought the end to his marriage with his first wife, which is an unimaginable situation. And I know it's very common for the couple to attack each other, because who do you hurt the most when you're really hurt? The people
Yeah.
you're safest with. And but him, Bob Hope, Mel Brooks, they're smiling all the time and they're doing what they love. And it's a reminder to all of us, is find that fun.
So,
In fact, not to sound silly, but for the movie Mary Poppins that he was in, there's the Sherman Brothers song, "In every job that must be done, you find the element of fun, and then the job is a game." So that's our task, is to find the fun in the job.
love that. And Richard, you're the father of these three girls. And I have to rewind to when I first met you. So I knew your mom because I worked at the Chamber of Commerce. Your mom was very involved in the chamber. I didn't know you, but every morning I would go get coffee at a local bake shop. I would get Grumpy Monkey coffee. That was my favorite coffee. And there you were, but I didn't know who you were. You were just a nice person who was also getting coffee. And I would always chat with you, and we would talk about, I have three daughters, you have three daughters, and we would just talk about family. And then I think one of the women who worked there said, "Oh, that's Richard." So I was like, "Okay, hi, Richard." And it wasn't until later, I think we were at a function and I put it together and I went, "Richard, Dontech." But what I loved about that was a couple of things. Number one, what was so clear in every conversation I had with you was your love and passion for your daughters. You were so enthusiastic when you talked about them, and you were interested in them, and it was just so evident and so clear, and it made it a joy to converse with you, a fellow parent of daughters. And then the other thing that I love about that story is that I think people have this idea of a CEO of a leading company and the way they're going to approach life and people, almost as though you would lead with, "Hi, I'm the CEO, and who are you?" And you were just so warm and approachable and accessible. So I have two questions. One is, what is that about? Like, where do you get that? Do you know that you have such an ability to connect with people? And that isn't always the first thing that somebody thinks about an engineer. And it's not even the first thing that somebody thinks about being, one of the community's leaders. So to what do you attribute?
I would probably say my dad again. My dad from when I was quite young, I remember him telling me, he said, "Richard, you'll learn something from everyone you meet." And he was great at being interested in people. It's fun uh, to learn through people and through their experiences. I I in some ways I'm an introvert, in other ways I'm an extrovert. And the way I've forced myself um, to accessibility is to talk about my daughters, who I'm wonderfully proud of. They're smart, they're amazing hearts, they're good people through and through. Are they perfect kids? Have they figured out life in varying degrees? Yes, and varying degrees, no. And the reality is it's been a kind of a fun run. I learned, and I'm not sure where I learned this. Maybe I learned it from looking at Dick Van Dyke movies as a kid, was to get eye to eye to the kid. Maybe it was my dad answering questions in a more approachable way. But, my kids always joke and say, "Dad, you're either really serious or you're really silly." But with talking to people, uh, you ask them questions. If they're nervous, you show you're human, and because a lot of people have kids or nephews and nieces or friends have kids. And if most people ask me what I do, I'd probably say I'm an engineer or I work in a family business. If someone said, "What do you do at Dontech?" I'll say, "I guess you could say I juggle and I try not to let balls hit the ground," which is true. You fill in here and there. Um, the problem is if you present things in the wrong way, you'll make people stiff, make them uncomfortable. Also, some conversations, people, I don't even know how to say it nicely, they can be showy and
Right.
just look around. And so, back to my father's advice is he'd say, sometimes you learn something not to do by looking at other people. But he said, you will learn something from everyone. And I've unfortunately seen a lot of examples where people weren't bad people, but they shut down the room or they shut down the individual. And a lot of times that's due to insecurity. And the hard part is to remember to not to play into it, because you can't control them, but you can control your response. And that's hard. And that's something that I just reread a book that I had read 20 years ago, the Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it gets a horrible title, but a wonderful book. And it
Yeah.
teaches you how to be interested in people, how to be a better listener, how to try to look at things from their perspective. And if someone reacted badly to how you approach them, rather than defend yourself and attack, is to stop and say, "Gee, why do I think they reacted that? Well, what could be in the background, the motivation." And also just something I'd put aside, and it said, like, if you look at it from a couple standpoint, if one of you's angry, stop and say, "You know what? Let's find a way to just table this and reapproach it." But if two of you are angry, nothing
Get
good
it.
is going to
Right.
come from it. And a reminder, and again, back to surrounding yourself with good friends and good family and good work friends is, you you want them to tell you what you need to hear also. And sometimes, close the door and in a manner that you like. And, I'll give one of my daughter's examples is I tend not to be someone that gets angry quickly, but occasionally just it's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I remember one day I was at home and I don't even remember what it was, but I was sharp in my response. And my daughter looked at me and she said, "Good God, Dad, what's wrong?" And I immediately, I'm like, wow. And because she knew it had nothing to do with it. But that's an example of
Yeah.
that's what you want the people around you, because we're all going to trip. We're all going to make
Yeah.
mistakes. And when you realize it too, and it's something it took me a long time to learn, is when you make a mistake, apologize. Now, the other person, they may not accept it, and that's okay. But and I remember my one daughter saying to me, "It doesn't make it better." And I said, "No, it doesn't, but it does acknowledge that I know that I made a mistake and that I'm going to work hard to be better tomorrow." And the interesting thing is it took a couple of years, but then she learned how to apologize too, because we all do it. Everyone
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. I think apologizing actually takes an inner strength and an inner confidence, and so it's the level of maturity and growth that not everybody is there yet.
Think back on your memories, and most of them are those little highlights. My mom, she was a great example. After my dad passed away, she realized the first 5 years she was just surviving. She wasn't living her life. And so she made a bucket list of everything she wanted to do. And she had to redo that bucket list 5 times because she kept crossing everything off.
That's awesome.
Be deliberate about your life. And the neat thing was that one of those items on that first list was take the grandchildren anywhere in the world they wanted to go at age 10 and above. And she did that. And all 9 of her grandchildren are world travelers, and none of them have issues hopping on a plane going anywhere because of that. And that's the other thing is, are we doing stuff that can, like, um, your kids notice with you, you bring smiles to people's faces wherever you are, whether it's grabbing a grumpy monkey coffee or meeting at a coffee shop restaurant place or meeting someone in the supermarket or traveling to a cousin or a friend in San Francisco is, I always tell people if you're overwhelmed, do something nice for someone else and you'll feel better. And a lot of times we have stuff that just looks like it's a lifetime plus to ever make it turn the corner. And every so often you have to jump out of the pressure cooker. And the best way to reset is bring a smile to someone else's face. So I'll sometimes help people with projects on my day off. Sometimes I'll just sit and have a conversation. And sometimes I'll hop on my bike and I'll ride 50 or 100 miles and just zone out.
So if you had to give a TED talk, if they said, Richard, tomorrow you're going to be giving a TED talk, what would the subject be? What would you choose to talk about?
I don't know. I think anybody can talk about anything. And so, kind of a corollary to that would be, um, oh gosh, it was like 2014, I think, 2015, maybe 2016. My dad's last sibling passed away, and my cousins called me, said, the 4 of us talked, and we want you to do the eulogy. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there's no way I could do this. And so I politely declined 4 times, and then it became apparent that if I declined the fifth time, I was going to offend my cousins. So I'm thinking I am the absolute last person that would ever want to do a eulogy. Now, one thing that my mom taught her kids was how to have like a heart of gold, to the point where my mom was a Hallmark junkie and she loved the cute children's story and whatever. So because of that, none of us can tell a heartfelt story without getting your heart stuck in your throat. But I figured I'd put that aside, and driving up to Boston with my 3 daughters and my mom in the car, we brainstormed stories about my uncle. And And I formatted it the same way because I've done technical talks for years. And my oldest daughter was typing as we were talking and put together and broke it up into 4 sections. And I told my daughter, if I get my heart stuck, you're going to have to come up here and read it. But it actually ended up being a nice tribute to my uncle. And I was amazed it was came together as nicely as it did. So I think anyone can do anything and you can cover almost any topic. The trick is it has to add value to the people listening. And so here I knew who the audience was because it was all family. And so people laughed at the right time. And then I had everyone almost in tears at the end, which wasn't the purpose of it. But for me, I barely got the last sentence out. But the long story short of that was one of the 4 sections was the love of my uncle's life, my Aunt Valerie. And when I saw my uncle 6 months before he passed away, and if you asked me what he died of, I would tell you he died of a broken heart because they were married a week shy of 63 years and he missed his best friend. And that was basically my wrap up theme. And um, about 6 months before he passed away, he told me the story. He said, Rich, what I miss most of all about Valerie being gone is just being able to reach over and hold her hand. He goes, whether it was on the couch or sitting in the bed. And so I ended everything by telling a story. My cousin had told me she was with her dad when he passed away, and he started talking like his identical twin was in the room, but his identical twin had died 15, 20 years prior. And so I ended with, I don't think my cousin was accurate. I don't think my Uncle Harold was in the room. I think all 3 siblings in the room, and the 2 brothers were talking about when it was time for Bill to leave this world. And then I'm like, they're brothers. They weren't talking, they were fighting. And so Natalie said to Harold, she goes, Harold, you got to pick when he comes. Rich gets to pick when he goes. And I'm a junior, so my dad's also Richard. And I said, everyone knows my uncle's a twin, but everyone may not realize that Harold came first. And so Harold picked the day they entered this world. Everyone knows my dad died a long time ago, but not everyone knows that my dad died 25 years to the day my Uncle Bill passed. So I said, my uncle left this world, but he did the one thing he missed most of all is he walked across the room and he reached over to the love of his life and grabbed Valerie's hand, the one thing he missed most of all. And people are like, "Oh my God!" And it's not the sort of talk I would ever do, but it was a nice tribute to a wonderful man. And my Aunt Valerie and Uncle Bill, I can think of 100 memories where if you were anywhere in the area, they always had a bedroom available for you. They'd always have a meal on the table if you arrived at breakfast or lunch or dinner. And I think that's nice. And if someone can come up with a topic that's tangible to the people. Years ago, Lafayette asked me to give a talk to what do engineers do. I know my mom gave a talk to the chamber on, how do you start a business? And all these to the right audience is tangible. To the wrong audience would be,
Right.
take me to the opera. My mom loved the opera. I went with her and I did it because I love my mom, but that wasn't my favorite form.
I'm with you. It's like some sort of sedative to me. Yeah. So, but what? Even your eulogy and even the things that you talk about, there's something about you where maybe it's because when you were so young, you were taught the ephemeral nature of life. You learned that in a really tangible way, younger than a lot of people do, because you seem to really have a value and understanding of life is it's here one moment and then it might not be. So you do seem to appreciate family and life and even business. You approach it all with a great enthusiasm.
Yeah. Yeah, and why it's probably many reasons, great parents, great family, great friends. And then I had my whole series of silly things that I've done through the years. Like when I was 18, I fell 27 feet, I broke my back. And when I first hit the stage, I couldn't move anything. And I'm thinking, oh my God. But the people say when something like that happens, your life flashes before your eyes. And it did. And I thought, oh my God, this is short. And then when I hit the stage, I'm like, I'm not dead. But then I'm like, oh my God, I can't move. And then when 5 or 10 minutes later, I was able to roll over. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I promise I'll be a good person from now on. But, there's different things that good or for bad. Like as a little kid, I was in a car accident. Everybody in both vehicles had concussions, multiple breaks. My lifelong friend was in a coma for 10 days. And I was the only one that walked away. I remember when I came to, I saw my friend being given CPR lying on the highway. So there's different things that people have in their life, and every family or friend, someone has, similar stories. And what teaches someone that life is fragile, whether it was my dad's stories, whether it was my own life experiences, I can't really say. But I will tell you, it's everybody thinks there's more time. I was talking to uh, a friend and a family member that's battling cancer, and it's going really, really well. Uh, and I'm like, you've been given a gift because you can be that inspiration for other people, but you also realize that a lot of the stuff, and I think this morning when we were on the phone, I reminded her of a story I read of Sam Walton when he was dying on his deathbed. His comment was something like maybe 20 billion would have been enough. He realized he knew the employees of his stores better than he knew his own family. A lot of times we prioritize things where we get upset about things that really don't matter. And some people are given a gift of, oh my God, like, why am I upset over, daughter ripped my car seat, or, whatever the silly stuff that we've all done it at one point or another. But at the end of the day, it's just stuff. So what really, if you knew how much time you had in front of you, what would you do differently? We've all heard it, but very few people change. I had another friend who was at a work meeting, and he had a stroke, and he face planted on the table. He basically looked at the two people in his office and he said, something's not right. And then he went down. And his wife never carried her cell phone. She was someone like you where it wasn't accessible. And she just happened to be home. So fortunately, because people were there, they called 911. They got him to the hospital immediately. They ran some tests, and they got Doug's wife on the phone, Gail, and they said, we believe it's a clot. We can give him this medication. He has, and I forget what the ratio was, we'll say 1 in 20 chance of a full recovery. But if it's an aneurysm and not a stroke, it will kill him. What do you want to do? Only the spouse can make the decision. And Doug's telling me this story, and he goes, I'm trying to talk, but he goes, nothing sensible is coming.
Oh,
He goes, I can't move anything on my left side. And Gail goes, Doug's a former Marine. He would say, go for it. And so Doug goes, it was the most amazing thing. He said within 3 minutes, he goes, I held up my left hand and he said, I'm going to be all right. And then when he told me the story, he almost burst into tears and he walked out of the room. But he was given a gift. And what he did is at the time when he told me the story, he was 67 and he turned over the company to the next generation. He goes, you know what? Gail and I are just going to, why am I doing this? I got stuck in the game. I'm okay letting it go. And so for him, that almost tragedy was a gift. And then he did something with it. And so the trick is, how do we remind ourselves that, some of the stuff we either dig our heels on, or, you don't make the phone call to the person you care about. As my dad said, don't leave the room. We don't know, if, tomorrow will be given to us. And what's the quote that I hear all the time is, you can't um, add more days to your life, but you can add more life to your days. And, but how do you teach people that? I don't know. And I don't always remember it, but on some days I do. And that means I'm better. I always joke and say, if I make 51% good decisions, where if I'm right 51% of the time, I'm doing really well. But nobody's right all the time. And I wish I were, but I'm not going to obsess over the fact that I'm not perfect.
thank you.
Take care.
Bye bye. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for being a valued part of the SolFul community. Thank you to William Aronson for writing, recording, and producing the SolFul Connections theme song. And finally, always know you're not alone. We are connected. We're all in this thing together, and you and your story are important. Let's just keep on connecting.